Hey, what's up, guys and gals? This is Adam, and I'm going to give you a quick lesson in web design. So we're going to start from the beginning. We're going to start with text document. We're going to put some HTML in there. We're going to use some file transfer protocol to throw it onto a server, and then we're going to take a look at it in the browser. So I'm going to give you the quick 101 lesson in web design right now, and I'm going to do it quick because there's a little bar down here you can drag around and listen to these pieces over and over and over again until you get into your noggin. All right, so let's jump in, take a look at a little presentation I've put together for you. So the basics of web design. You're going to have a web address to get to see these things on a browser. So the very first thing we're going to have in a web address here is this protocol. That's the HTTP. You might have seen HTTPS before, the more secure version. Anyhow, you got to have a protocol. Next up, you got hostname. That's www in this instance. Above that, you're going to see that you have a domain name. The domain name is going to be the name that you type into your little browser there and jump to your web page. But before you get all the way, you have to have a top level delimiter. You've seen these before. It's the .com, .net, .org. There's a few others out there. There's also, once you get to your server, a directory. So in this particular instance, I have a directory called Meatloaf. Now, if I didn't even have Meatloaf there, I'd be in the root directory, but we're going to get into the root in just a second. So inside that Meatloaf directory, though, you have a file called index.html. Now, there could be other kind of documents in that folder, but in this instance, the index.html document is going to be the first thing that opens up when you get into that directory. So let's break it down a little bit further and see what's going on in that index.html file. So HTML is built up of things called elements. So here's an element, and it's going to be diagrammed out. So let's jump in and see what an element's all about. The very first thing you're going to have an element is your opening tag. Now, it's a tag because it's going to have a left bracket, it's going to have a right bracket, and then inside you're going to have something called a P in this instance. Now, there's a lot of other little letters and tags and things that are going to come in there, but in this instance, P stands for paragraph. So there's our opening tag. Let's go take a look at our closing tag. There's a closing tag. It has a slash, has a P, and it still has those little brackets on the side. All right, so you have an opening tag, you have a closing tag, and right smack in the center, you got your content. Now, that content can be long, it can be short. You have a lot of things that are going to be going in between tags. Guess what? Elements are going to even go into elements. It's crazy. I know, it's like Inception. But when you jump back, here is our element in whole. It's not too hard to take a look at. But as you go along, you're going to have other things inside those tags. Now, in this instance, we have what's called a tag attribute. The tag you're looking at here is the A tag, which stands for anchor. But inside that A tag, you're going to also have this thing called the attribute, like I said before. It's href, and then it equals, and you're going to have some quotations. And essentially what we're doing is we have a relative link to another page called page.html. So right next to that index page, there might be a page called page.html, and if you did have that, you in your browser, it might render like this. You'd click on text and you get right into that page HTML. Okay, so right now we've been doing some work on our computer, okay? We have a text file, we've been doing some stuff. In that same text file, we might decide to drag it into a folder. Okay, so now we're starting to do a little bit better on the web design. Once you have that text into a folder, there it is. Basic web page. It's not really a web page quite yet, but we're almost there. You gotta think about this. There's a folder, there's a document. Alright, so if you took a look at the document, had some HTML in there, you'd probably have your web page. But let's get a little bit deeper. That folder is called your root folder. If you have this root folder, this parent, and you're going to have all these little child documents inside there, that is your entire web page. Realize that this folder is going to contain everything for your web page. So here we go. We have this root folder, and we have 3 documents in it for this example. Now, you could have a whole bunch of other documents, you could have a whole bunch of other folders, but this is very simple, very basic website stuff. Very first thing that you're going to see is that we have what's called the index.html, and that's going to be the very first folder that's going to hit when you jump into that folder and you look at it in a browser. It's going to be looking for a file called index.html, so this will be the first thing that you'd see in this particular root folder. So I'm going to go over here for just a second. You can even look at this, maybe write it down, do something else, but I'm going to move on pretty quickly. We're going to actually go through this in just a second. The next file that you'd have in here is your CSS file. Now, this is going to be your presentation of your document. If you take a quick look at that CSS, there's what you got for CSS. links. And then the last thing that you have in here is another folder. We call it images. So this might hold a lot of the images that you had in your document. So here's an image that we're going to link into that document. So if you went to a web browser and you refreshed your document after putting those particular pages in there, it looks something like this. That's actually what it would look like, that document that you just took a look at. All right, so we've been doing this all at home at this point, okay? So we're at home, we're making those little files, or we're looking at them in the browser locally, but guess what? We want to put those files on a server. Why do we want to put it on a server? Well, because if you put it on a server, then you can share it with everyone around the world. It's great stuff. That's what web's about. So let's take a look at it. We're at home right now. We put our little file structure together. We have our root folder. We have a few documents in there. We've marked it up with elements, and we have everything set and ready to go. But how do we get it to the server? Well, we need to have a program called an FTP. What the FTP allows you to do is access the server and put those files right onto it. So once you put those files right through the FTP, there's your file structure sitting on a server that's out there. And that server, guess what it's going to do? It's going to give everyone the files that you've created at home and share them across the web. Okay, so that's the basics of what we're about to do. So let's jump in and do that right now. Okay, so here I am, just the basic desktop of a computer. The very first thing I need to do is I need to go create a text file. So I'm going to jump into Text Wrangler in this instance. And you know what? I'm a poor typer. Plus, you don't want to see me type all this code up. So I'm just going to control paste some code. There is our code. Let's break it down real quick. Very first tag, doctype. Doctype HTML, we're working HTML5. If you don't know what a doctype is, it's really kind of the thing that says, hey, this is an HTML document, and this is the particular versioning of HTML that I'm going to use. Now, if you're looking at a prior version of HTML, it actually looks pretty ridiculous and a lot longer, and there's a lot more variables that you'd have within that tag. Check it out online if you want to look more at doc types. We're going to just go HTML5 all up in here. So first tag inside our HTML document is HTML. Now let's just jump all the way to the bottom of the document and you see, well, there's a closing HTML tag. Awesome. But Adam, you told me that you're supposed to put spacing in between these so we know how to nest the things properly. Absolutely right. That's why I pasted it in here so I can show you what you're going to do. So first off, we're in this doc type tab. I'm just going to leave that alone and say, here is our first tag in our document. So I look there, there's no more closing tag right after that. There's a header tag and it's starting up too. So guess what? I'm going to tab that little guy out. And then I'm going to go down to the next line and say, uh-oh, title tag, that's opening too. So I got to tab that twice. And then I'm going to run through, but then guess what? There's a closing title tag. So we've already had a closing title tag. All right, so we can keep that there. There's a meta tag that comes up. All right, we're going to tab that out twice too, because you know what? It's in with that head. Now, just a quick note, that meta tag charset UTF-8, that's just going to make sure all the characters that are being used within this document are coded as UTF-8. Just put it there. Believe me, it's worth it. Next one, we have another meta tag. Now, I'm going to tab that one out twice because that one doesn't have a close. It's a self-open close kind of tag situation in this particular instance. Now, just to give you a heads up, this meta tag is for responsive design. Eventually, you're going to be putting these things called media queries into CSS, and it's going to make it so that you can adapt a grid-based layout onto any device that you have out there. So I throw this in there default for any kind of web design I'm going to do. Now this other one is negotiable if you necessarily need it in there, but it is a link to a CSS sheet. So I'll tab that guy out twice, and what this is going to do, it's going to allow me to put a CSS style sheet right next to this index.html, and then I can put all my styles in there. That's going to give that whole structure that I'm about to put into this page some presentation. Okay, so if you could put some CSS in line, you can put some CSS in that head, but there you have it. Those are the basic things you have in your head. So here's the head closing out. I'm going to tab that one once. So if you review HTML to start, we got a head tag, opening, closing. Looks really nice. So let's jump into the body. I'm going to tab that body out once. Inside that body, we have an H1 for heading 1, so I will tap that out twice. And then I'm going to go ahead and tap out the subheading twice. You'll notice there's an H1, it opens, it closes, it surrounds our content. This is the entire H1 element. This is the entire H2 element. All right, we have a paragraph tag in there. I'm going to go tab that guy out twice. And then I also have the body tag, and I'm going to tab that one out once. Now we have a really awesome document put together. Now, mind you, we are in a text document, and so I got to go to File and Save, and I will save this document right to the desktop. So on our desktop, I'm going to name it index.html. So save that sucker. Let's take a look at what we got on our desktop. So we got an index.html file. Let's double click it and take a look at what we got. Awesome. There's our web page. We made a web page. First thing you can see here is we got this heading or logo. And then there's our H2, there's our subheading. And then there's the paragraph. You'll notice up in the tab, there's our title of page. So we've made a web page. We're awesome. So if we go down a little bit and we wanted to make some edits to that index.html, what we can do is I'm going to right click, I'm going to open it. In this instance, I'm going to go with Text Wrangler. Let's just add a few more tags to make this thing kind of cool. We got to add in a link tag. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go under this paragraph. I'm going to start with an A, and then I'm going to have my attribute with href equals, and we will go and link out an absolute link to a great website out there called http://gamifyedu.co. Okay, so we got our HTTP link in there, and then I'm going to go ahead and close that A tag. Now, it's when I say close the opening tag by putting that right bracket in there. And then we got to put the link text in there. So I could go ahead and put gamifyedu, and then I will close my A tag. So we got a link in our document. We have a web page ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and go to File, save this guy up. Let's take a look at it one more time to make sure we got something rolling here. And there we go. We have heading or logo, subheading, this paragraph tags, and our link. So clicking off the link, we should get over to our gamifyedu, which we do. So let's go host this page and see what it looks like using the web. Alright, so we just have an index file, and if you remember before, we're local, we're at home, we're just trying it in our browser. Well, we need to jump into something called FileZilla. So here's FileZilla, free open source program that you go and download at FileZilla-project, I believe. And so you get into FileZilla, and of course you have to have a hosting server to make this all work. That's a different tutorial altogether, but in this instance, let's say you already have one, you get your FileZilla set up, you get in with your host name. So the very first thing I'm going to use is my host name, which is gamifyedu.co, and then I got to throw in my username, adam@gamifyedu.co in this instance, and then I'm going to type in my password. Now, what you're going to see in this particular FileZilla is it is a file transfer protocol, and what that means is that on this left-hand side, it even says right here, this is our local site. This is your computer. This is your home. And you want to transfer that information over to your remote site. Now, we're not connected to the site yet, but I'm going to click this quick connect, and we're going to jump right into gamifyedu, which I have here. Now, there's already some directories in here. We're going to just forget about those for just a second, and I'm going to come down, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to create my own directory. For this instance, I'm going to go ahead and put in Meatloaf. Meatloaf. So I throw in Meatloaf, and I will hit OK. So we have this directory called Meatloaf. I'm going to go into Meatloaf folder, and I want to put that index file in there. So I got to go over to this side. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to refresh. I want to make sure that I see that index file that's on my desktop. So there's a few things I could do right now. I could literally drag this over into this side, or I can right click and I can upload, or I could even double click, and it's going to make it over into this right hand side remote directory. Let's do it. Double click, and it's going to shoot right over into that directory. So let's go see it live online. So if I go online, I go to gamifyedu.co, and then I got to type in Meatloaf. So Meatloaf, enter, and we should be at our web page. So there we go. We hosted a file easily online. And notice that we go to gamifyedu/Meatloaf. You look into this file, and you see that I have a directory called Meatloaf in there. It's easy stuff, guys. And so what you can do is, let's say you went and put something on your folder. We're in our Meatloaf folder. I'm going to minimize this for a second. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. What if we took this file, right click, move to trash can? Uh-oh, I lost my index file locally. No. All right, that's all right. You have a backup on your FileZilla. So there we are on FileZilla. I got to refresh this side so that you see that that file is actually gone. And on our directory, all right, now I still have that file. Thankfully, it's sitting on my server over there. So I could double click it again, and it's going to push it right back onto my desktop. Hooray, I got my file back. So let's go check that out. That's right, here's our index file. We got it back. So we have that index file that we can throw between the server and that local site. That's very important. But I also want to show you something else. So if we went to the web again, we took a look at this file, look at what we got. A basic heading, subheading, this is a paragraph text, some Gamify EDU, but let's make another change and see what we can do. Let's change this heading or logo, and I'm going to put my name in there. So I'm just going to right click on the index file. I'm going to open it again with Text Wrangler, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to change that heading and logo to my name. There we go. I'll make that change and I will save it up. Minimize that guy up, and I'm going to go back into FileZilla. Now we want to take a look, and we have this index file that's on the left hand side and the index file on the right hand side. So if I double click this time, it's going to give me this, do you want to overwrite? And now this is the question, do you want to overwrite the file onto the server? And you had just made a change, and yes you do, but sometimes you got to be careful because you can overwrite a file that you didn't intend to overwrite and lose all the changes. So make sure when you get to this overwrite screen, you know that you're overwriting an older file. In this instance, I'm going to hit OK there. And now if we take a look at it on the web, go over to the web here, and I'm going to hit F5 or refresh it up. There's my name that's been brought into the file. We've made a change. It's going back to that FTP and making the change, downloading the file, uploading the file. It's a lot of that structuring. And you'll notice that I have Gamify EDU, Meatloaf, and because it's called index.html, it's automatically going to load that indexed file. So just to really hit that point home, if I went here and I duplicated this file, and let's just call this file page, because we were messing with that in our demo there, so I call that one page HTML. And to really make it work, I'm going to right click it and I'm going to open it with Text Wrangler real quick here and make a quick change. Instead of putting Adam in there, I'm going to call this one page 1, and then I'm going to save it again, and I will go ahead and go back here to FileZilla, and this time I'm going to refresh, make sure we get everything from the desktop popping in there, and I'm going to host that page. Now I didn't put a link for that page over here. Let me refresh it so you can see that it's actually in there. So there's the page on the server. Well, let's take a look at how you get to that page through the browser. So here I am in Firefox again, or in the Meatloaf. There's no link to that page.html, but I will put just page.html, and when I hit enter, we're going to go to page 1. So you got the basics of putting a web page together and then going in and hosting on a thing. I know I did this one somewhat quick, but hopefully it's going to give you a helpful time when you're jumping in and you need to start learning how to structure an HTML page. Peace.